Hey, everybody, welcome back to another fantastic edition of the His and Her Money Show, where we make it our business to help you take dominion over your money and your life. We are excited to have another opportunity to do that with this episode. Thank you for tuning in, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on the podcast app of your choice. We're grateful that you're here. We're grateful to have your eyes and your ears with us. We hope that you learn a great deal, not just learn it, but that what you take inspires you to take action. So that's our goal with each and every episode, including this very episode. We're going to be talking about financial freedom. Listen, financial freedom is not a myth. It's not something that's a unicorn. It's not something that's unattainable. It's something that can be done no matter what your circumstance is. And so we like to bring you examples of people pursuing it, people knocking it out the park in this very area so that you can know that you can do it too. So get your pen and paper ready. We got a special guest by the name of Walli Miller, who is here to share her story of how she's been pursuing financial independence and what she has learned along the way. So get ready to learn and be inspired. Hey, Walli, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hello, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
We're grateful to have you here. You have a fantastic story. You've been on an incredible journey with your husband. And so we want to learn more about that. But before we get into your story, some people are being introduced to you for the first time. So can you say hello to them and then let them know what you are all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Walli Miller, and I am married and have a French bulldog, and we live in New York City. My husband and I consider ourselves dinks. Basically, that's DINK, which means we're dual income, no kids. And we started our financial independence journey a few years ago. And actually, I have to say thank you to you and your wife, because back in 2015, 16, there wasn't a whole lot of financial content out there. And so you were the first YouTube channel, or maybe not the first, but you were one of the first three that I had ever watched. And so it's been nice to also see your journey in the last few years. But yeah, that's a little bit about my story. My husband and I, we shortly after getting married, discovered the FIRE movement and really wanted to take control of our finances. And we're well on our way to being work optional in just a couple of years.
All right. Now break those terms down. Some people may be hearing them for the first time. FIRE movement, work optional. Break that down. What is it that you're going after?
Yeah, so I want to say that I sort of started my career out of college. I got myself a good job. I found a career path that I really enjoyed, right? And I think that's sort of a win there in itself. I really enjoyed my coworkers. I felt passionate about my job. I switched to a couple different offices, but always really enjoyed that. Now, as you can imagine, the story shifts, right? From having sort of an ideal job, an ideal situation, to being put into a toxic work environment when there was a shift in management. And I did what most people do, which is go to the interwebs, like, how can I quit my job? What do I need to do? What are my options? And it was at that point that I sort of started to realize that I was making decent money. And in my opinion, I was good with money, quote unquote, because I didn't have like credit card debt, but I didn't have anything to show for the money that I was making. So I had really fallen into this whole pay my bills and spend the rest. I was saving a little bit of money, but I didn't have any goals attached to it. Like, what was I saving? Like, saving for the sake of saving. And so it was during that time that I went onto the internet, and I just so happened to see a very kind of clickbaity article, and it was about a couple who had retired in their 40s. And I was like, retired in your 40s? Like, how is that possible? And of course, I went in with all of the suspicion, as you could imagine, and read their story. And it wasn't that they were, six-figure earners, living in like small town, any, main street, it was really a couple who had prioritized how they wanted to spend their money, and also created a path. so that they could fund their own retirement. And that was the first time that I realized that retirement wasn't an age, right? I had bought into this whole thing. You have to work until you're 65 or 70, and I learned that retirement wasn't an age, it was a number. And so that was my introduction into something called the FIRE movement or FIRE community. And it simply stands for financially independent, retiring early. I think us millennials and Gen Zers for sure have redefined what retiring early means. It's not about sitting on a beach with a little umbrella drink, right? It's about having more freedom, having options, and I like to use the term work optional. So I could work if I wanted to, but I don't have to work in order to sustain my lifestyle. And yeah, that's sort of my journey there.
Good stuff. Now, how did that go over in the initial conversation? You came across this information, you started digging into it, you had this epiphany like, oh, retirement's not an age, it's something that I can dictate depending on my strategy and consistency. When you brought this to your husband, was it like he got it right away? Did it take some multiple conversations? Because somebody's sitting in your seat, they're listening to this and they're being introduced to this concept for the first time, and their mind is going to be expanded to a thought process that they didn't have before, and they're going to go want to tell their significant other. How did that go?
Yeah, so I will say, so I found this article and I remember digging into it for over a weekend. And so on Friday, I read the article back and they had a blog. So I went to their blog and their blog mentioned a couple podcasts and a couple other blogs. And I mean, I went down the whole rabbit hole of what are they doing, right? Because I still didn't understand it. I was very skeptical. But I'm like, what am I missing? Like, how is this possible? And so I read blogs, I started listening to podcasts, I went to YouTube to try to find as much as information as I could. And then on that Sunday, we went to church, came back, and I remember I was sitting in church and I was like, is this being lazy? Like, because I want to be work optional, if I want to retire early, is this being lazy? Like I had some kind of internal conflict there. But we came back, and I remember I used to do a lot of couponing, right? So I always found ways to like save money, but for me, saving money was just another way to spend more money, right? So I reduced my grocery expenses and then I had more money to spend. And so I remember like looking at the Sunday newspaper and I told my husband, listen, over the weekend, this is what's been going on. And I had a spreadsheet and I was like, I think we would be able to retire in about 15 years, but we have to make some changes. My husband was like, okay, cool. I don't think he cared about how. He was just like, what? I could quit my job in 15 years? So he was really on board. And I have to say that I am a natural spender, even to this day, right? I am a natural spender. My husband really didn't spend money. And he knew about investments, right? He knew about wealth building. And in his mind, when he was little, he had told his father that he was going to work with his head and not his hands, like so he always wanted to work smarter and not harder. And so when I presented the idea just of there's a pathway for us to start this journey of being able to retire way earlier than 65 or even 55. Are you on board? And he was totally on board. And I am mainly the one who deals with the finances. So it was up to me to decide, okay, how can we start optimizing and start changing some of the things that we're doing with our finances?
Nice. Now, I want to give everybody context to let you know that this is a person you should be taking notes from, because not only did her and her husband get out of debt, but then they also became millionaires by applying the strategies that she's about to share. So if you weren't listening before, I hope you're listening now. So, Walli, take us back. The conversation has been had. Husband's on board. What do y'all do differently than what you were doing previously?
Yeah, the first thing I did was try to figure out if I had more money to put aside into savings. And initially, I'm like, no, not really. And so I listed out what our incomes were. and I listed out all of our essential expenses. So those were the things that were non-negotiables, things that we had to pay. So I had to finish paying my student loans. I had to finish paying my car off. We had to pay my husband's car off. We didn't have any credit card debt, but there was a lot of sort of discretionary money being spent. And that was where I realized that I could make the change. And what I wanted to do, what I felt most comfortable doing, was really tackling the debt as soon as possible. And because I didn't have that much student loan debt or car note debt, what I did was that when I looked at my essential expenses and I subtracted that from our income, I was like, wait a minute, this is saying we have a few $100s left over. I was like, I never have a few $100s left over. What am I doing wrong? Right. And that was sort of an eye opening experience, like really understanding, because I always paid the bills on time, but I never took into account really how much we were spending. And so when I listed out our essential expenses, including all the debt that the monthly payments that we made for our debt, I was like, you know what? I think we can put a couple $100s extra to the car note, to the student loan, in order to pay those things off. And so we focused on getting rid of that debt. The journey for us wasn't going to be very long. We had maybe about a year. Left if we did it according to sort of what my plan was, if we put those extra few $100s towards those debts. And so I said, okay, let's do that. Let's really focus on paying down this debt. We only have a few extra payments. What started happening was that now that I was aware of my spending habits, of how I was having sort of these wallet leaks or these budget leaks, that also helped me to reduce my spending. And so I'll give you an example. It was really easy for me to go to the dollar store and say I was going to spend $3 on three different things. I would leave there with like 15 items I didn't need. I would go to Target trying to buy toilet paper and laundry detergent, and I would leave with like home decor pillows, right? So I was also a very impulsive shopper. And so it made me aware of how I was letting money sort of slip through my fingers. And so when I noticed that, I was like, you know what? Instead of putting this extra $10 here, $20 there, $50 here, I'm going to be focused and be committed to putting this money so we can pay off the debt that we have as soon as possible.
And what was your approach as far as were you going from, some people go from smallest debt to largest debt, some people go from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, some people make lump sum payments, some people send money every chance they get some extra money. So what was you all's approach to attacking your debt?
Yeah. So one thing that happened is my husband and I both got paid every 2 weeks. And so there were 2 months out of the year where you get that third paycheck. And what we did was that we decided that those third paychecks was going to go straight to debt. So that helped a lot, right? Because that was like, okay, you know what? We are living off of two paychecks every month. If this third paycheck comes, it used to be like free spending money. So I will say that that helped, being able to say that third paycheck, that third Friday. What we would do is dedicate that to paying off the debt. I didn't pay attention too much on the interest rates. I will say that my student loans had about a 2% interest rate. I know long gone are those days. My car note also had maybe like a 4% interest rate, and my husband had about a 4% interest rate. So the interest rates were relatively low. So I focused on which one is the quickest one, which is the smallest one that we can get rid of as soon as possible. And in my case, it was actually my student loans. I have been paying them for a long time, for almost a decade. So I was almost finished paying off, but it never like occurred to me to put more money towards my student loan until this time, until I thought about it.
Now, I'm curious because you said something that just came back to my memory. You said when you were first learning about fire, like, am I being lazy because I want to retire early? Do you think your cultural upbringing was a part of why you had that thought, even if it was a fleeting thought? Talk about how you were raised, what you saw, the examples that were before you, what your parent values that were instilled in you. Because for a lot of people, they may be having those similar thoughts, like, "Man, that sounds dope," but it might feel a little icky, based on what they've experienced. So, talk about your cultural upbringing and how that's impacted that moment, and even as you continue on in this journey.
Yeah, actually, something that I've talked about in the past is like this term called wealth guilt. And this is something that I really struggled with even before I learned about the fire movement or anything like that. So I think that was its ugly head sort of rearing itself back. Um, I had, I went to college, I got myself a good job, and was able to start making pretty good money, right? Not right away, but in my late 20s, I was close to making six figures, right? And so I remember the paycheck that came in right after I had my raise. And instead of being excited about it, I felt heaviness. And I did feel guilt about it, right? I'm a Latina. I'm born and raised in New York City, in the Bronx specifically, right? This is like the poorest borough. And I remember feeling really guilty about the money that I was making, knowing that my friends, my family, my parents, like I was making more money than they had ever made. And I remember having to sort of deal with those emotions. So when I learned about the fire movement and how that I could leverage the income that I was making, now I was living in a high cost of living city, right? So that amount of money might seem like a lot, but it can go really fast, especially if you're taxed really high. But that being said, I didn't fear about not being able to pay my bills. Like I was able to pay my bills. I just realized for the money that I was making, again, I had no, like very little to show for it. And I realized that I needed to be doing something different. So when I heard about the fire movement, about people leaving their jobs in their 50s and 40s, I did feel guilt again. And I wondered whether or not it was something good, right? Like we're supposed to eat off the the work of our hands, the labor of our hands. So it's just like I don't know how to feel about this. But it wasn't until I sort of again had to do a money reframe, right? I had to shift my money mindset and really kind of understand that having the money that I had wasn't just about living the good life. It was also how I could impact those around me, how I could impact my community, how I could impact my family. And really, what I have done now, what my husband and I have done now, is that we use the principles that we learned about wealth building, about investing, in order to start building legacies for the next generation. I mentioned my husband and I don't have kids, but I got a whole lot of nieces and nephews. And so I use the same principles about investing and compounding interest and compounding growth to create 10 different accounts. I have 10 nieces and nephews, 10 different accounts to start building and saving and investing for college, right? Something that I didn't have. I already mentioned I had student loans that I had to take out. And so that was sort of how I worked through that. But it wasn't easy, right? I think sometimes even today I have to like put myself in check, put that negative voice in check about what it means to have wealth, right? My definition, I never even related to that term wealth. Like I thought of like an old person in a velvet robe smoking a cigar. Like that was my definition of being wealthy. And so I had to really define what wealth was for me.
Now, talk us through that exercise. How do we go about articulating what retirement, what wealth means to us to help us come up with our own frame of reference as to the type of retirement portrait we want to create?
Yeah, it really, I know this sounds a little woo woo, right? But it really starts off with imagining what you want your life to look like. And then just using money as a tool to get it, right? I'm a financial coach now. And what I help my clients do is that really design, right? I want them to design the life that they want, not just for today and tomorrow, but also what is it going to look like 6 months from now? a year from now, 5 years from now? And it can be really hard to sort of picture ourselves a little grayer, with a few more wrinkles. But it's really about what is the type of feeling that you want. Because saying you want to be debt free to be debt free, like, okay, cool. Like, okay, but like, why? Like, why is it that being debt free is important to you? And I feel like if you can really tie a strong purpose, that will be the motivating factor to stick to your plan. And so when we're thinking about wealth, this is actually an exercise that I go through with my clients, and it's like, tell me the things that you would love to do if you had more time. Tell me the things that you would love to do if you had more money. And usually those things don't really revolve around money, right? It revolves around being able to explore, right? We could do a lot of exploring that costs money, and also a lot of free exploring, right? We could do, when we talk about spending more time with friends and family, okay, how can we do that in a creative way that maybe won't affect our financial milestones that we want to reach, or the financial goals that we want to reach, right? Sometimes some of those things do include money, right? My goal right now, I have a 2008 Honda Accord that is paid off and has 130,000 miles, but my next car is going to be a Tesla. Do I absolutely need a Tesla? No, but I want to save for it, right? That is something that I want. And that is okay to have those desires, to want to have something nice, right? But I'm not going to go into debt for it. And so I think really defining what a wealthy life looks like is really about think about the type of lifestyle you want to live. And I think with that comes with, as you continue on your journey, you can start thinking about the type of legacy you want to leave.
Imagine a life where your money isn't strangled by mortgage payments. Imagine what you could do when you don't have to send them money that you work so hard for. Come get simple, powerful, and real solutions to eliminating monthly mortgage payments forever. America's #1 money couple presents Crush My Mortgage. In this exclusive course, you will be equipped with strategies to help you move faster toward the promised land of owning your house free and clear. Learn strategies to help you in the areas of payment acceleration, extra income generation, and wealth creation, all to help you crush your mortgage. Visit crushmymortgage.com and get started today. Join us on the path to power, freedom, and legacy. That's crushmymortgage.com.
You bring up something super interesting to think about, because one thing, we've been doing this for a while, helped a lot of people do this, get out of debt free, get out of debt and get free and head towards financial independence. And one thing that's not often talked about is when you entrench yourself into the debt freedom journey, even when you get out, sometimes you get stuck there mentally, meaning that you don't allow yourself to think about nice things, getting nice things. I could never get a Tesla. No, I got to get another used car with 100,000 miles on it, because, hey, cars go down in value. They don't go up. So why would I? And so I'm curious, did you experience any of that? Did it take you a while to say, yeah, I've been rocking this '08, but my next joint, oh, I'm going Tesla. I mean, with the doors that go up like this, and like, how did you mentally allow yourself to think different? Because it's one type of mindset to have that bunker mentality to eliminate debt out your life, because you got to cut, and you're probably working extra and you're just trying to squeeze every dollar that you can to throw at the debt. But then there's supposed to be another side. You're supposed to be getting somewhere, to where we call it hustle season. We don't call it hustle forever, but there's a season where you got to hustle and grind. But then the point of it is to get to a place where then you have options and you can do and pursue strategically, like you talked about, you're saving up for it. But some people, they get stuck there. They like, I can't have these nice things. You know what I mean? Because what's the ROI on that? So talk about that.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really great point, because I think it's not a a destination. It's really a journey. It's something that happens all of the time. My husband and I will go on vacation, and when he's on vacation, he's on vacation. Okay. So he wants to, have every meal out and enjoy his coffee as we stroll through the streets. And in my mind, I'm like, really, do you need another cup of coffee? Can you get the small one instead of the medium sized one? And so there is this portion of me, and this is why it's important to find a partner who balances you, right? So my husband is like, we can afford it. This is not going to sidestep us from our goals, right? We planned this, right? And I think some people have issues with that. I know that I have had clients who will save for a specific goal, let's say for a vacation, and then they feel guilty about spending the money they save on vacation. And I'm like, listen, you've worked very hard to save, and this is what it's for. And I want you to spend lavishly. I want you to spend the money that you have planned to spend, right? And so there is this sort of there can be this internal battle, this mental battle. And so I think, there's still some things that I spend money on the things that I truly value and that bring me joy. So it's about really being intentional. I talked about a little bit of my impulsive shopping and my mindless spending, right? I would go to Target to buy one thing, and I would leave with a whole cart full of things that I hadn't really planned for. And so I have definitely shifted that. Now, there might be some things that I do spend money on that people be like, what? Why are you spending money on things like that? And then there's other things that I don't spend money on, and you're like, wow, she's being really quote unquote cheap, right? And I'm just like, I don't value that, so I'm not going to spend money on that. And I think it really is about a journey. And I loved what you mentioned about how some people will reach debt freedom, right? They'll be completely debt free, and then they stay in that mentality. And I think that's why balance is so important, right? When we're talking about creating a spending plan, and I like to use the word spending plan because, as I mentioned, I'm a natural spender. So I want to know how I could spend my money rather on what I can't spend my money on. So when we're thinking about creating a spending plan, it's really about, okay, how is this aligning with the things that bring me joy and the things that I value? And again, no one can determine that except for you. So don't let anybody's outside, influence what you really want to spend money on. And to your point, it'll be really interesting once we have hit the total amount of money that we have in the bank that I need for the Tesla, how easy or how hard it will be to actually be like, okay, now we made it. Can I go and spend it? Right. But right now, I'm super excited about it, right? I know that if I wanted to buy a car today, I could, right? I could take out another loan, right? But that it's not something that I value that much, right? So I'm like, I'm cool with waiting until I can feel 100% guilt free and happy. And it doesn't mean that, everybody can buy a car cash, right? Like sometimes it's just not possible, especially right now. We know that the rates for used cars are really expensive. But it's about knowing that the decisions that you are making on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly or monthly basis, doesn't take away from the things that you want in your life, those milestones and those financial goals that you want to hit.
Now, when you started this journey, y'all had a negative net worth. And now today, you all have a seven-figure net worth. So that means that you all made some decisions on the investing side as well. So talk about how you approached investing. Did you wait till you were out of debt to start? Did you start while you were getting out of debt? And the types of strategies or vehicles that you use to build your net worth.
So both my husband and I had 401ks. I worked for the government, so I had something called the TSP, a thrift savings plan, but it's similar to a 403b or 401k. So both my husband and I were contributing some to that. I didn't really understand what a 401k was. I didn't really understand retirement plans were. But as I slowly learned, I realized that those are investments. I had to understand what I was investing in, because back in the day when you is particular, and actually sometimes this happens still, right? This is why it's so important to pay attention to what's going on into your retirement plans. But for me, the default was that if you had a TSP, those would go into a G fund, which essentially meant it was like cash. It was like sitting in bonds, right? And so while we were paying off debt, and like I said, it was the student loan and the two car notes, while we were paying those things off, we didn't touch our 401ks. We allowed them to continue to grow. As soon as we finished paying off all of our debt. And we were able to pay off our debt in less than a year. Originally, we thought it was going to be a year, but as I mentioned, I started becoming more aware of where my money was going. So then I was able to put extra money towards that debt. So we were able to become debt free. I think it was within 7 months, maybe six or 7 months. And like I said, we used those 3 paycheck Fridays to really pay off the remaining debt that we had. And so we did continue to invest, and but it because our journey to debt freedom was relatively short. It was after we paid off the student loans and after the debt that we were like, okay, now we have this extra cash. How do we make this grow? And that was when we first focused on reducing our taxes, right? We live in a high tax city. So we first focused on reducing our taxes. And we realized that one of the ways to do that was simply by contributing to a 401k. So we kept increasing our contributions to our 401k. And we didn't even start maxing out our 401k until 2017. So that kind of tells you the power of investing and the power of being intentional, right? It wasn't that we right away started maxing out and throwing in, thousands of dollars. Like, we really slowly started increasing those contributions until we could max first our 401k out. Once we did our 401k, then we looked at other avenues.
Now, for some, it's going to be an intimidating process because when you contact your HR and you say, hey, you know what, I think I'm ready to start investing in my 401k or 403b or TSP, or if you've been doing it, but you just kind of threw something together and you're not even really sure, like you said, when you first took your TSP, you was in a G fund, which is essentially a bond, it's not really getting nothing off of it. How did you become acquainted with where you should be placing your dollars, and how would you help others to do that? Because when they go to the HR, they're gonna get either this big packet with all this list of funds, or they're gonna get a link to a website that shows all this, and it can be intimidating. You know what? Never mind. I'm not even gonna worry about that right now. How would you push them into action?
Yeah, this is a really great point, because I think sometimes, like, if you go to your benefit specialist, right, it can be like, oh, we can't tell you where to invest in. And so I think really understanding what the market is and understanding what is contained inside of your retirement plan, right? I read this book that really sort of helped me feel really confident, and it's called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. I'm sure you're familiar with that book. But that book really helped me understand what some of the basics, sort of like the investing 101 basics was. Because when I thought about investing, I thought it was like gambling. I was like, what's the difference between investing and gambling? And I was like, I know people cry when they invest money and they lose money. And I see people cry when they invest money, or not invest, but they gamble money away in the casino. So I really had to sort of understand what the investment funds was available to me. And how I did that was, one of the tips that I really learned was, when we're thinking about the type of funds you want to be invested in. And now this is not just for your retirement account, but because we're talking about retirement accounts, when you're thinking about the type of funds that you want to retire in, um, or not retire in, but you want to invest in, um, when we're thinking about usually in a 401k or in a workplace retirement plan, they don't allow you to invest in individual stocks. So what they do have is something called mutual funds. And a mutual fund, rather than an individual stock, is just a basket of stocks. Or perhaps you have an index fund which follows a specific type of index. And so what I really enjoyed, or what I learned and what made me feel confident, was I didn't have to do a bunch of research about all of these individual companies. I could just say, okay, let me see if in my workplace retirement in my workplace retirement options, are there any funds that follow the index? And there are a couple different indexes. I will mention a few of them. You can have a total stock market index. You can also have the S&P 500 index. And the S&P 500, we probably heard the Dow Jones is up, the S&P 500 is down, When we're listening to that, the Dow Jones basically follows some of those legacy companies, those companies that, have been around for a long time, like they're like 30 companies. The S&P 500 is an index of the top 500 American companies. And so I looked to see if I had a fund that followed either the total stock market index, or if I had a fund that followed the top 500 American companies. And that was one of the first ways that I looked. I think another thing to keep in mind is to look at what are the fees associated with those accounts. So, what are the management fees? What is the expense ratios? And usually you have, in your statements, it will say it will have those listed out. And so that was something else that I looked at, because even though you might have two index funds, right, that follow the S&P 500, they may not be the same as far as cost. So taking a look at that. So I know I've mentioned a lot of acronym and a lot of jargon, but this is why it's not this is not a race. This is really about learning some of those fundamental principles out there. And I know you've had a couple of investing uh, episodes as well. But I think the more that familiar you become, the more you listen to it, the more you read about it, the easier it'll be and the more confident you'll be.
Yeah, everybody, a great resource to help you with this is one that Walli mentioned earlier. It's from J.L. Collins. It's called The Simple Path to Wealth. If you read that, you will be set. JL is the GOAT, in my opinion, and he makes it super. It's why it's called The Simple Path to Wealth. Everything that Walli mentioned, he explains and expounds upon and makes it easy for you to comprehend. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes. Again, it's called The Simple Path to Wealth, and the authors is J.L. Collins. All right. So were there some other things outside of your 401k and your TSP that you and your husband did to get your net worth to the place where you become work optional and towards your goal of FIRE?
Yeah, we first, little by little, started maxing out our workplace retirement accounts. And then we started to put money aside in Roth IRAs. We put money in there until we could max it out. So we were maxing out our 401ks, our Roth IRAs. And then if we had money left over, or if we brought in extra income, rather than spending all of the extra income, we began to put that money aside in a regular taxable brokerage account. Now, I will say, if you have been following the market over the last 5 years, I mean, it's been on a rise, right? So we have benefited from 10, 20, almost 30% returns on a year basis. So we haven't saved $1 million, right? We have consistently put money aside into those investment accounts, and the market has been doing the work for us. Now, of course, as we know, right now the stock market is down, but this just means that as we continue to invest, as we continue to put money into our 401ks, our workplace retirement accounts, our Roth IRAs, we're buying these funds or these stocks at a very low price, at a very low rate, right? They're going back to prices that we saw back in 2020 and 2021. So I think it's really important to create a plan that is going to be fitting for you, that is not going to be all about focusing on just one goal, right? It's not about the deprivation. It's not about getting to it as fast as you can, right? It's about enjoying the journey there. And so figuring out what is going to work best for you. And simply, that was how we did it. I will say that today I do have some individual stocks, but it's such a very small portion of my portfolio that I really do the simple path to wealth, which is really just sticking to index funds and sticking to low cost mutual funds, because I don't have time to do all that research.
100%. Now, I know that you all are almost at the goal that you set for yourself as far as fire. So I'm curious, and maybe people listening are curious, how did you know what number to target? And once you get there, what's the big plans for you guys?
Yeah, so that what has again been a journey, right? To try to figure out what it was. For me, it was never about not doing anything. I knew that I wanted to do something. And as I learned more about investing, as I learned more about really being intentional, being an intentional spender, being an intentional saver, it was I was kind of upset that I didn't learn this earlier in my journey, right? Like, why didn't I learn this in school, right? Why didn't my parents know about this? Why didn't anyone teach me this? And as I talked to people in my circle, I realized that this was something that they didn't know either. And so today, what I will say is that being able to knowing that I could quit my job gives me so much freedom, and it also helps me to appreciate what I do have. Like, I enjoy my job today more than ever before, right? Because I know that if things ever got to the place that they were a few years ago, I wouldn't have to tolerate it, that I could just leave, right? I also have started teaching people this, right? I mentioned I created my business, which is something that I never thought was possible, right? I always consider myself like a 9 to 5 person, not an entrepreneur. But as I helped my friends and family come to understand what were some of the things that they could do differently to really optimize and maximize their life, I realized that this needed to get out there. And it's one thing to like share the resources, right? You may have books right now all about personal finances sitting on your bedside table, but it's not about reading it, right? It's about implementing it. And so now I also started a business, right, where I help people with financial coaching. And so I have all of these different passions and projects that I'm like, if I had complete control of my time, I could pursue those things without worrying how my bills are going to get paid. My husband is a little bit different. Like, he's like, I have always loved chess. I want to be a grandmaster, and I want to dedicate, some time to seeing if I could ever hit that status. Like, he's been in competition or not. What is it competitions or tournaments? There we go. He's been in different chess tournaments and things like that. But that is something he wants to pursue. So I think it's just like, again, having, what is it that you really want to happen? And what my passion is today might be different 5 years from now. But having the freedom to decide what I want to do and to switch passions is really important, right? Um, I like to say that I kind of took the lazy way to wealth building, right? There's so many different ways, right? You can own real estate, you can be an entrepreneur, or you can invest in index funds, sit and wait and let the market do it for you. And that was sort of the path that I chose. And we do invest quite a bit now. As I mentioned, it's both my husband and I. The maximum that you can contribute to a workplace retirement account is $20,500 a year per person, and it's two of us. So you can imagine that we're investing about $60,000 a year. So we definitely have had those things, but being able to when I think about how much we were spending, I'm like, I would have not had that money. I would have been spending it along the way. And so really figuring out what's most important to you, I think it's
Good stuff. And I know y'all are taking people on the journey. So let everybody know about where they can come and find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, absolutely. I am most active on Instagram. You can find me there, which is financially_thriving. But you can just go to my website, financiallythriving.com, and you'll see all my socials there.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, if there's somebody listening who's hesitant to think that they could do what you and your husband did, maybe their debt was a little bigger, maybe their income is a little lower, what would you say to them if you had a chance to talk to them?
Oh, absolutely. Right. It can definitely, if you are making more money, it can seem like the path will be easier. And for some people it is. But we know I was definitely one of those people who was making $90,000 and I was spending $90,000, right? And then you have people who are making 50,000 and are saving 5,000. So it's really about focusing on how much you can save and invest. And if there's a way to make additional income, but if you can focus on how to save and invest more money, you will be in a much better place than if you just spend every dollar that you earned.
Good stuff. Walli, we can't say thank you enough for coming and sharing your story and encouraging everybody to get it together, because they can get fire, they can get work optional just like y'all. So thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. I appreciate it.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another fantastic edition of the His and Her Money Show is in the books. I hope you took good notes. I told you some good information was coming your way because we want you to take dominion. Remember, dominion has to be taken. It's not handed out. You have the ability to put yourself in the position that you want to. If you're willing to do the work, come up with the plan, and be consistent, you have what it takes. Remember, we got information by the ton, just like this, over at our website, hisandhermoney.com. That's all we got for this time, guys. It's been great. Until next time, peace.